Dawn filtered through the canopy as Lizera followed Kale deeper into what she was beginning to understand was not just a settlement, but a thriving civilization hidden beneath Earth's green veil. The path wound between massive trees whose trunks could house entire families, their roots forming natural bridges and terraces where humans had built their homes. Thornhaven revealed itself gradually, like a secret whispered in stages. Stone buildings melded seamlessly with living wood, their walls covered in flowering vines that served both beauty and camouflage. Water wheels turned lazily in diverted streams, powering workshops where the sound of hammers on metal rang through the morning air. Gardens cascaded down terrace slopes heavy with fruits and vegetables that shouldn't exist on a dead world. 300 years, Kyle said, noticing her amazement. That's how long we've been perfecting this. Children played in the courtyards, their laughter echoing off stone walls as they chased each other between market stalls, where traders haggled over hand-woven textiles and carved tools. Adults went about their morning routines, tending gardens, feeding livestock, preparing for the day's work. It was so normal, so alive, that Lizera felt a deep ache in her chest. Your people believe we're extinct, Kale continued, guiding her toward a large central building crowned with solar collectors disguised as flowering trees. But extinction was never our fate. It was our choice. The great hall's interior took Lysera's breath away. Living trees formed the support columns, their branches interweaving overhead to create a natural cathedral. Sunlight filtered through, strategic gaps in the canopy, illuminating murals that told the history of human civilization, not its end, but its transformation. Elder Mira Blackwood sat at the room's heart, her silver hair braided with small bells that chimed softly when she moved. Despite her age, her green eyes held sharp intelligence and a strength that spoke of decades leading her people through impossible challenges. So, Mira said, gesturing for Lysera to approach, the galaxy sends us a scout at last. I wasn't sent to find you, Lysera replied carefully. My mission was geological survey, resource mapping. Mira's laugh was bitter. Ah yes, the resources of dead Earth. How convenient that would be for the Galactic Coalition. She stood, moving with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to command. Tell me, child, what do your people say happened to humanity? Lysera hesitated, suddenly aware that her answer might determine whether she left this place alive. The archives record environmental collapse, wars over dwindling resources. The last human settlements fell to plague and radiation storms 2 centuries ago. Plague, Mira repeated softly. Yes, there was plague, but not the kind your archives describe. She gestured to the murals around them. Would you like to know what really happened to humanity? The story unfolded in painted images and Mira's measured words. Humanity had indeed faced environmental crisis, but they had been adapting, learning, rebuilding. Then the first alien contact came, not the Vayari, but the Korgani Empire, promising aid and partnership. Within a generation, human colonies across the galaxy had become labor camps. Earth's governments, desperate and deceived, had signed treaties that sold their people into bondage. The Vayari came later, Mira continued, more subtle than the Korgani, but no less dangerous. They offered protection from their enemies, guidance for our development. We watched the Zenthari accept similar offers. Within 50 years, their homeworld was a mining operation and their people were scattered across the galaxy as indentured servants. Lysera felt sick. None of this matched the histories she'd been taught. The liberation wars were conquest wars, Kale interjected. Your people just gave them prettier names. Mira raised a hand for silence. We chose to vanish rather than be consumed. The brightest minds of our generation collaborated on the greatest deception in human history. We faked our own extinction, plague ships broadcasting distress signals before exploding in deep space, false archaeological evidence of civilization collapse, even manufactured radiation storms to keep surveys away from viable settlements. But the environmental damage was real but not fatal. We learned to work with our world instead of against it, to hide within nature rather than dominate it. Mira gestured toward the thriving settlement around them. This is what humanity became when we stopped trying to conquer and started trying to belong. Over the following days, as Lysera's injuries healed, she began to understand the true scope of human achievement. Their technology was elegant in its simplicity: solar collectors that looked like flowers, water purification systems that functioned as waterfalls, transportation networks that followed natural animal paths. They had learned to live lightly on their world while maintaining a civilization that was, in many ways, more advanced than what she knew. Kyle became her guide and, increasingly, something more. He showed her workshops where artisans created beautiful objects from recycled materials, laboratories where scientists studied ecological balance rather than resource extraction, schools where children learned to read both books and the forest around them. "We have 17 settlements like this one," he told her as they walked through the research gardens. "Maybe 20,000 people total. Not many by galactic standards, but we're growing." "And no one knows?" "No one in the galaxy. There are other groups, isolated survivors who never learned the truth, feral colonies that fell to genuine disasters. They serve as cover for our deception." His expression darkened. "Sometimes we help them when we can, but contact is dangerous." Lysera found herself drawn to this life, to these people who had chosen survival over surrender. More troubling, she found herself drawn to Kale, his quiet strength, his passion for his people's hidden achievements, the way he looked at her, not as an alien curiosity, but as someone who might understand their cause. When her ankle healed enough for longer walks, he showed her the settlement's defenses, not weapons, but camouflage systems so sophisticated that orbital surveys would show nothing but unbroken jungle, energy dampeners that masked their heat signatures, communication scramblers that prevented accidental detection. "What happens when someone like me finds you?" she asked. Kale's expression was unreadable. "That's up to Elder Blackwood, and up to you." On her 7th night in Thornhaven, as she sat in the common hall listening to musicians play songs that preserved human culture and hidden melodies, Lysera realized she was no longer thinking about rescue. Her emergency beacon remained silent in her damaged ship, and for the first time since the crash, that didn't terrify her. It thrilled her, but her contentment shattered when Kale appeared at her side, his face grim. "We've detected search patterns in the upper atmosphere, long-range scanners moving in systematic grids. Her people were looking for her, and if they found Thornhaven, everything she had come to care about would be destroyed." "How long do we have?" she asked. "Days, maybe less." Kale's hand found hers, his fingers warm against her cooler blue skin. "Lysera, there's something you need to understand. If they find us, we won't just disappear again. We can't. This is our last sanctuary." She met his eyes and saw the question there, the hope and fear intertwined. He was asking her to choose, she realized. Not just whether to help them, but whether to become one of them. For the first time in her life, Lysera understood what it meant to have a home worth protecting. The warning klaxons screamed through Lysera's consciousness as her hovercraft bucked and twisted in the grip of Earth's most violent storm system. Her pale blue fingers gripped the control console, knuckles deepening to sapphire as she fought against atmospheric forces that dwarfed anything in her pilot training. "Stabilization failing," the ship's AI announced in its maddeningly calm tone. "Hull breach detected in sectors 7 and 12. Lysera's red hair whipped around her face as the craft spun, emergency lighting casting eerie shadows across her angular features. Earth stretched below her like a scarred, angry beast, exactly as the archives described. A dead world, they'd told her. Nothing but ruins and radiation storms, perfect for resource extraction once the atmosphere settled. The mission briefing had been routine: map the southern continent's mineral deposits, avoid the worst weather systems, return with geological data. Simple scout work for a junior officer of the Vayari Exploration Corps. What they hadn't mentioned was that Earth's storms could reach into the upper atmosphere with fingers of pure electromagnetic fury. Emergency landing protocols engaged. The AI continued as the craft plummeted toward a sea of green that shouldn't exist on a dead world. The jungle rushed up to meet her with terrifying speed. Ancient trees, impossibly tall and thick, reached toward her craft like grasping hands. The impact came in stages. First the canopy, branches scraping against the hull like claws, then the sickening crunch of metal against ancient wood, and finally the bone-jarring slam as her craft embedded itself in the forest floor. Silence. Lysira hung upside down in her harness, warm blue blood trickling from a gash above her right temple. The taste of copper filled her mouth. Apparently, her people and humans shared that particular biological quirk. Her left ankle throbbed, and moving her right arm sent lightning through her shoulder. "AI status report," she whispered. Nothing. The console was dark, smoke curling from several panels. Emergency power had failed. Through the cracked viewport, she could see twisted metal and the green twilight of the forest floor. Vines were already beginning to creep across her ship's hull, as if the jungle sought to reclaim this intrusion immediately. The air that leaked through the hull breach carried scents she'd never encountered. Rich earth, growing things, and something else. Something that made her skin prickle with unease. After 20 minutes of careful movement, she managed to extract herself from the wreckage. Her ankle couldn't bear full weight, but she could walk. The gash on her head had stopped bleeding, though her red hair was matted with dried blue blood. The jungle around her pulsed with life. Insects buzzed in harmony. Bird calls echoed from the canopy, and something large moved through the underbrush nearby. This wasn't the dead world of the archives. This was a thriving ecosystem that officially didn't exist. Following what seemed like an animal path, Lysira limped deeper into the forest. The light was fading, and despite her enhanced night vision, she needed shelter. Her survival training kicked in. Find water, find shelter, signal for rescue. Though, after seeing the storm that brought her down, she wondered if rescue would even be possible. The path led to a clearing where ancient stone structures emerged from the forest floor. Human architecture, but not the ruins she expected. These buildings were weathered but maintained. Carved channels directed rainwater into collection pools. Garden plots showed recent cultivation. Her heart hammered as she approached what appeared to be a central dwelling. Through a gap in the stone wall, she could see the warm flicker of firelight and smell cooking food. Voices carried on the evening air, low, conversational, distinctly human. Impossible. She pressed herself against the wall, listening. The language was Earth Standard, though the accent was unlike anything in her linguistic databases. They spoke of weather patterns, crop yields, and someone named Kale, who was late returning from patrol. A branch snapped behind her. "Don't move." The voice was male, speaking Earth Standard with that same unfamiliar accent. Something hard pressed against her spine, a weapon of some kind. "Turn around." Slowly. Lysira raised her hands and turned to face her captor. He was tall for a human, with dark hair and intelligent brown eyes that studied her with equal parts suspicion and fascination. His clothing was practical, woven fabric and leather that spoke of skilled craftsmanship rather than primitive survival. "What are you?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew she wasn't human. "My name is Lysira. She paused, suddenly uncertain how to explain her presence without revealing the truth about her mission. "I crashed in the storm. I need help." He lowered his weapon, a crossbow, she realized, elegant in its simplicity. "Vayari?" Her surprise must have shown on her face because he smiled grimly. "We know more about the galaxy than you might think. I'm Kale Voss." He studied her injuries with a practiced eye. "You're hurt." "Nothing fatal, but I need shelter and my comm systems are down." Kyle was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing options. Finally, he nodded toward the settlement. "Elder Blackwood will want to speak with you. But understand, there are rules here. Sacred trusts. Break them, and your injuries will be the least of your concerns." As they walked toward the firelight, Lysira realized her simple mapping mission had just become infinitely more complicated. The humans weren't extinct. They were hiding, and now she was about to discover why. The search patterns grew tighter each day, invisible threads of scanning energy that passed overhead like the breath of hunting predators. Lysera found herself spending more time away from the settlement proper, ostensibly to avoid detection, but increasingly because the jungle paths led to moments alone with Kale that made her forget the danger closing around them. "Your people are thorough," he observed as they crouched behind a grove of flowering trees, watching a distant glint of metal pass between the clouds. "That's the third pass today." "Standard search protocol," Lysera replied, though her attention was more focused on the way afternoon light played across his features. "Commander Zephyr doesn't abandon people. Even scouts who crash on dead worlds?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Lysera's training said she should be grateful for rescue, eager to return to her ship and her duties. Instead, she found herself dreading the thought of leaving this place, these people. Leaving him. "Tell me about your world," Kale said as they walked deeper into the jungle, following paths that seemed to exist more in his memory than on the ground. "What's it like among the stars?" Lysera described the great orbital cities of her people, structures of crystal and light that danced around their homeworld's 3 moons. She spoke of vast libraries containing the knowledge of a dozen species, of art galleries where masterpieces from across the galaxy were displayed, of her own apartment with its view of nebulae that painted the night sky in impossible colors. "It sounds beautiful," Kale said, but his tone suggested something else. "And empty." "Empty? All that space, all those worlds, and yet your people travel in ships, live in stations, experience everything at a distance." He paused beside a stream where water cascaded over moss-covered rocks. "When did you last feel rain on your skin? When did you last taste food that came from soil you could touch?" Lysera realized she couldn't remember. Her life had been climate-controlled environments, synthesized nutrition, experiences filtered through technology. Even this mission to Earth was meant to be conducted from a safe distance, sensors and probes collecting data while she remained, protected in her craft. "Here," Kyle said, leading her to where the stream widened into a natural pool fed by a waterfall. "This is where I come to think." The place was magical, hidden in a grove of ancient trees whose branches formed a natural cathedral overhead. Phosphorescent flowers bloomed along the water's edge, their soft light reflecting off the pool's surface. The sound of falling water created a rhythm that seemed to match her heartbeat. "It's incredible," she breathed. "My grandmother brought me here when I was young. She said every person needs a place where they can be completely themselves." He turned to face her, and in the soft light she could see vulnerability in his eyes that he'd never shown before. "I've never brought anyone else here." The confession hung between them, heavy with meaning. Lysera felt her pulse quicken, aware of how alone they were, how the dying light painted his face in shades of gold and shadow. When he stepped closer, she didn't step back. "This is impossible," she whispered. "Most worthwhile things are." His hand touched her cheek, fingers tracing the line of her jaw. Her skin was cooler than his, but where he touched her, warmth bloomed. She had studied human anatomy, knew the basic compatibility between their species, but theory had never prepared her for the reality of this moment. "Kale?" He silenced her with a kiss that was gentle at first, questioning until she responded with a hunger that surprised them both. Her hands found the strong line of his shoulders, pulling him closer, as the last barriers between them began to dissolve. They broke apart, breathing hard, and Lysera saw wonder in his eyes that matched her own. "This changes everything," she said. "I know." They sat by the water's edge as true darkness fell, her head against his shoulder while he told her stories of Thornhaven's history. His voice was a low rumble against her ear, and she found herself memorizing the sound, knowing it might be all she had to take with her when the time came to choose. "The first settlers nearly died that first winter," he said. "The old growth forests were dying from the environmental damage, and they didn't understand yet how to work with the ecosystem instead of against it. My great-great-grandmother was one of the scientists who figured out how to accelerate the forest's recovery. That's why the settlement feels so integrated." We're not living in the forest. We're part of it. His arm tightened around her. Which is why leaving is not just difficult, it's unthinkable. This place shaped us and we shaped it in return. We belong here in a way that can't be replicated. Lysera understood the subtext. He was telling her why he couldn't leave with her, even if she asked. This was his world, his people, his purpose, just as the stars were supposed to be hers. They talked through the night, sharing stories and dreams while the phosphorescent flowers pulsed around them like living stars. She told him about her training, her ambitions to become a senior explorer, her secret fear that she might spend her entire life cataloging wonders without ever truly experiencing them. And now? He asked, as dawn began to filter through the canopy. Now I'm wondering if I've been living my life backwards. The walk back to Thornhaven felt different, charged with new possibilities and impossible choices. Other settlement members gave them knowing looks, and Lysera realized their growing connection was obvious to everyone. Elder Blackwood pulled her aside that afternoon, her expression serious. Kyle is precious to us, the elder said without preamble, not just as a person, but as one of our finest scouts and teachers. I won't see him hurt by impossible dreams. I would never. Wouldn't you? Mira's green eyes were sharp. You're falling in love with him and he with you, but love doesn't change the reality of what you are and where you belong. The elder's words stung because they echoed Lysera's own doubts. What if where I belong isn't where I came from? Then you'll have to prove it. Words are easy, child. Sacrifice is not. That evening, as Lysera sat in her quarters reviewing star charts and technical manuals she'd salvaged from her ship, Kyle appeared in her doorway. Having second thoughts? He asked, noting the navigation data spread across her table. Always. She gestured for him to join her. My people have a saying, the path home is always lit by the stars you've already seen. And what does that mean? That returning is easier than moving forward into the unknown. She met his eyes. But sometimes the unknown is where you need to be. He crossed the room and pulled her into his arms, and this time when they kissed, it was with the desperate intensity of people who knew their time might be running out. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. Stay with me tonight, he whispered. It was a request that meant more than physical intimacy. It was a promise, a claim, a step toward a future that might not exist. Lysera looked at the star charts on her table, then at the man who had shown her what it meant to truly belong somewhere. Yes, she said, and knew that with that single word, she had crossed a line from which there might be no return. Outside, the search patterns continued their methodical sweep, growing closer with each pass. But inside the hidden settlement, two people from different worlds discovered that some barriers existed only in the mind, and that love could bloom in the most impossible places. Lysera awoke in Kale's arms as the first light of dawn painted the settlement in shades of gold and green. Her blue skin seemed to glow against his darker complexion, and she marveled at how perfectly they fit together despite coming from different worlds. Last night had been a revelation, not just physical, though the memory of his touch still sent warmth through her body, but emotional. For the first time in her life, she understood what it meant to be complete. The tranquil moment shattered when urgent voices echoed from the settlement center. Search pattern Delta 7 is directly overhead, someone called. All personnel to concealment positions. Kyle was instantly alert, warrior instincts overriding the gentle lover of moments before. They're getting closer. Through the window, Lysera could see people moving with practiced efficiency, children disappearing into underground shelters, adults activating camouflage systems that would make the settlement invisible from above. 3 centuries of hiding had made them experts at vanishing. My ship, Lysera said suddenly. If they find the crash site, we've been monitoring it. Your people haven't detected the wreckage yet, but they will. Kyle was already dressing, his movements economical and urgent. Elder Blackwood has called. An emergency council. The great hall buzzed with tension as settlement leaders gathered around a 3-dimensional map showing local geography. Red dots marked the positions of Veyari search craft, their patterns growing tighter around Thornhaven. With each pass, "They know you're alive," Elder Blackwood said without preamble as Lysera entered. "The question is whether they know about us." "Commander Zephyr is thorough," Lysera admitted. "If my emergency beacon was damaged in a specific way, he might suspect I survived the crash. But finding me in this jungle should be impossible without ground teams." "Should be," repeated Jace Morrison, the settlement's head of security. His scarred face spoke of battles fought in humanity's hidden war for survival. But impossibility has a way of becoming possibility when the stakes are high enough. Mira activated a holographic display, showing the search patterns in detail. "They're using deep scan protocols now, penetrating radar that can detect metallic objects through the canopy. If they scan your ship directly, they'll find traces of local biological material, evidence that I left the crash site." Lysera studied the patterns, her tactical training analyzing the methodical approach. "Zephyr will send ground teams to track my movements." "Then we move you," Kale said immediately. "Get you to one of the outer camps." "No." Lysera's voice was firm. "Running just delays the inevitable. If they're committed to finding me, they will. The only question is whether they discover Thornhaven in the process." Silence fell over the council as the implications sank in. Jace was the first to voice what everyone was thinking. "We could end this cleanly. No witnesses, no evidence. Make it look like she died in the crash." "Jace." Mira's voice carried warning. "I'm not advocating murder," he said quickly. "But we have protocols for this situation. Staged death, false remains. Her people leave, we remain hidden." Lysera felt the weight of hostile stares from several council members. She was an existential threat to everything they'd built, and they all knew it. "There's another option," she said quietly. "I could go to them. Tell them I survived. Guide them away from the settlement. And when they ask how you survived for 2 weeks in hostile jungle," Kyle demanded, "I tell them the truth, that I found ruins, took shelter, survived on local vegetation." She met his eyes, seeing the pain there. "It's not a complete lie." "It's suicide," Kale said flatly. "You've learned too much, seen too much. They'll know you're hiding something." Elder Blackwood studied Lysera with those sharp green eyes. "You would sacrifice yourself to protect us? People you've known for less than 2 weeks?" "I would sacrifice myself to protect the people I love." The words hung in the air like a declaration of war. Lysera hadn't meant to say it so boldly, but there it was. Her choice laid bare for everyone to see. "The matter requires discussion," Mira said finally. "We'll reconvene in 2 hours." As the council dispersed, Kale caught Lysera's arm. "We need to talk privately." They walked to his quarters in tense silence. Once inside, he turned to face her with an expression that mixed anger, fear, and desperate love. "You can't do this. I can't let them find Thornhaven. There has to be another way." "What way?" She moved to him, placing her hands on his chest. "You said it yourself. This is your last sanctuary. If the galaxy discovers humanity survived and thrived, what do you think happens next?" Kale's jaw tightened because they both knew the answer. Humanity would be rescued from their primitive existence, relocated to proper facilities, integrated into galactic society. Within a generation, their unique culture would be extinct and their people would be just another client species in the great cosmic hierarchy. "I won't lose you," he said fiercely, pulling her against him. "Not when I've just found you." The kiss that followed was desperate, full of longing, and the terrible knowledge that time was running out. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Then come with me," she whispered. "Leave with my people. I can request assignment to a deep space mission, somewhere we could be together. You know I can't." His voice broke on the words. "This is my home, my people. Asking me to leave is like asking me to stop breathing. And asking me to let them destroy everything you care about is asking me to rip out my heart." They held each other as the reality of their impossible situation settled around them. Two people from different worlds bound by love but trapped by duty and circumstance. A soft chime from Lysera's salvaged communicator broke the moment. The device had been damaged in the crash, but it still received certain priority signals. "What is it?" Kyle asked. Lysera's face went pale as she read the message. "Zephyr is requesting direct communication. He's suspicious about my extended silence. Can you ignore it? For a while, but if I don't respond soon, he'll assume I'm compromised or captured." She looked up at him with eyes that held terrible understanding. "Which means he'll commit to full search protocols, ground teams, deep scans, systematic grid searches. How long do we have? Hours, maybe less." Kale closed his eyes, and when he opened them, Lysera saw the leader he was beneath the lover. "Then we need to make a choice. All of us. Tonight." As if summoned by his words, the settlement's alarm bell began to toll, not the gentle chimes of daily life, but the urgent bronze voice that called every soul to assembly. Through the window, they could see people emerging from their homes, faces grim with understanding. The final council was about to begin, and with it, the decision that would determine not just Lysera's fate, but the future of humanity's last secret. "Whatever happens," Kyle said, taking her hand, "know that these have been the best weeks of my life." Lysera squeezed his fingers, memorizing the warmth of his touch. "Mine too." Together they walked toward the great hall, toward a decision that would change everything. The great hall had never felt more like a cathedral as the entire settlement gathered in the pre-dawn darkness. Families clustered together, children pressed close to their parents, while the elders took their places in the ancient circle of carved stone seats. Above them, the living ceiling of intertwined branches seemed to pulse with the collective heartbeat of humanity's last secret. Lysera stood at the center with Kale beside her, acutely aware that every eye in the room held the same question. Would she choose them, or would she choose her own people? Elder Blackwood rose, her silver bells chiming softly in the hushed space. "The search patterns have intensified. Our long-range sensors detect at least 6 Vayari vessels conducting systematic scans. We estimate 12 hours before they discover the crash site, perhaps 18 before ground teams reach our perimeter." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Fear, determination, and underneath it all, the quiet pride of a people who had survived the impossible for 3 centuries. "We have 3 options," Mira continued. "First, we evacuate, scatter to the other settlements and hope they don't follow our trails. Second, we make our stand here and trust our defenses. Third," her green eyes found Lysera's, "we trust in the choice of someone who has come to understand what we're fighting to preserve." Jace Morrison stood from his place among the security council. "Elder, with respect, the first 2 options keep control in our hands. The third places our entire future in the hands of someone who's been here less than a month. And yet," said Dr. Elena Vasquez, the settlement's chief physician, "she's the only one who truly understands both worlds, the only one who can speak to her people with knowledge of what we've built here." "Assuming she chooses to," Jace replied grimly. All eyes turned to Lysera. She felt the weight of their fear, their hope, their desperate need to believe that someone from the outside could understand what they'd sacrificed to remain free. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the stone hall. "About my mission here." A chill settled over the crowd as she explained the truth, that she hadn't come to Earth by accident, but as part of a survey mission to catalog resources for extraction, that her people viewed Earth as a dead world ripe for mining and exploitation. "So you see," she concluded, "even if I convince them I survived alone, even if I lead them away from Thornhaven, it only delays the inevitable. Eventually, the mining ships will come." The silence that followed was deafening. In it, Lysera could hear the death of hope. Then Kale spoke. "Unless they have a reason to believe Earth is still protected." All eyes turned to him as he stepped forward, his voice gaining strength as the idea took shape. What if they thought humanity wasn't extinct but ascended, evolved beyond physical existence? What if Earth wasn't a dead world but a sacred one, protected by beings of such power that disturbing it would be unthinkable? Elder Blackwood's eyes brightened with understanding. "The phantom signals," The energy readings that have kept survey ships away from our most sensitive areas. We could expand them, Dr. Vasquez added excitedly. Create the impression of a vast, invisible civilization watching over Earth. It would require coordination with all the settlements, Jace said, his tactical mind already working through the implications. False energy signatures, phantom communications, maybe even some carefully staged encounters with survey teams. It could work, Lysera said slowly, but it would require someone on the inside, someone who could guide the deception from within the galactic community. The implication hung in the air like a bridge between two worlds. You're talking about leaving forever, Kyle said quietly. Going back to your people, living a lie for the rest of your life. I'm talking about protecting the most beautiful thing I've ever found. Before anyone could respond, Lysera's communicator chimed with an urgent priority signal. Commander Zephyr's face appeared in holographic projection, his expression stern with concern. Scout Lysera, respond immediately. Your silence has exceeded acceptable parameters. Lysera looked around the hall at faces that had become dear to her, then at Kale, whose love and support shone in his eyes despite the pain of what was coming. I'm here, Commander, she said, activating the transmitter. Report your status immediately. Are you injured, captured? Negative, sir. I survived the crash and have been conducting ground surveys while attempting repairs to my communication system. Ground surveys? Zephyr's tone sharpened. On a dead world? That's just it, Commander. Earth isn't as dead as our archives suggest. I've been detecting unusual energy patterns, signals that suggest evolved life forms. The lie came easier than she'd expected, perhaps because underneath it lay a deeper truth. The humans had evolved, not into energy beings, but into something far more remarkable. A civilization that had learned to live in harmony with its world. Explain. Over the next several minutes, Lysera spun a careful web of half-truths and misdirection. She described phantom signals, mysterious energy readings, and the unmistakable sense of being watched by unseen intelligences. She painted Earth, not as a resource waiting to be exploited, but as a world under the protection of beings far beyond galactic understanding. I recommend we maintain our distance, Commander. This world is clearly claimed by forces we don't understand. Zephyr was quiet for a long moment. Acknowledged. Maintain your position and continue monitoring. A recovery team will reach your coordinates within 6 hours. The transmission ended, leaving the hall in tense silence. Will it work? Someone whispered. For now, Lysera replied. But I'll need to return with them, file official reports, guide the long-term deception. She turned to face the assembled crowd. This isn't goodbye. This is the longest undercover mission in human history. Elder Blackwood smiled through tears that caught the dawn light filtering through the canopy. You're choosing to become our guardian in the stars. I'm choosing to protect my home. The word hung in the air like a benediction. Home. Not the orbital cities of her birth, not the ships that had carried her between worlds, but this place, these people, this love that had transformed her understanding of what life could be. Kyle stepped forward and took her hands. How long? I don't know. Years, maybe decades. However long it takes to convince the galaxy that Earth is off limits. And then I come home. The kiss they shared was witnessed by an entire civilization, a promise sealed before the most sacred audience either could imagine. When they broke apart, Lysera saw her own determination reflected in Kale's eyes. I'll wait, he said simply. I'll return. The recovery team arrived exactly 6 hours later, their sleek shuttles descending through the morning mist like metallic birds. Lysera met them at her crash site, playing the role of grateful survivor, while her heart broke with every step that took her further from Thornhaven. As her people's ship lifted away from Earth's surface, she pressed her face to the viewport and watched the jungle fall away below. Somewhere in that green expanse, hidden beneath layers of living camouflage, the most precious thing in the galaxy continued its quiet existence. 6 months later, Scout Lysera submitted her final report on the Earth survey mission. Her recommendations were clear. Earth was to be designated a protected world. off-limits to mining operations due to the presence of unknown but clearly advanced life forms. The report was accepted, filed, and Earth was quietly removed from all resource extraction databases. In the months that followed, other survey teams reported similar phenomena: phantom signals, energy readings that suggested vast intelligences at work, the unmistakable sense that Earth was already claimed by beings far beyond galactic understanding. The deception spread and grew, protected by whispered stories and classified reports that painted Earth as a world where only fools would dare to trespass. And in the depths of Earth's recovering jungles, humanity continued its greatest work: the patient rebuilding of paradise, watched over by a guardian angel who had traded her wings for love and who counted every day until she could come home again. The last entry in Lysera's private journal, written in the blue ink that matched her skin, read simply, "Some choices echo across lifetimes. Some loves span the stars. Some homes are worth any sacrifice to preserve." In Thornhaven, Cale read, similar words carved into the bark of an ancient tree by the hidden waterfall, and smiled as he counted the days until his love returned from her mission among the stars.